Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all here and councillors today for our December meeting. Firstly, as normal, we start off with public forum. So we have one speaker, and that is Betty Brown. So Betty, if you'd like to come up to the lectern, that will be good. Come out. Oh, sorry. I don't know. There you go.
Done. Right. Okay. I don't know if the council are aware or any of the staff, but I go to Temora a fair bit, and on the way home, where you go join the Cootamundra-Gundagai Regional Council boundary, there's no sign. There's two posts there, but no sign. And I don't know if they're aware or it's been nicked or what's happened, but it's definitely not there. Now, down near the mill, down here, there's an old sign that used to have like Apex and all that sort of clubs. Well, it's really rusted out and there's names missing off it. Can we have that removed? It shouldn't be there, sort of, because they've got those new signs around town now. Now, in Sutton Street, on the Sutton Street and Mackay Street, there's signage there, which is Mackay, Sutton Street, in the roundabout. Well, there's two signs that have been missing for a long time on that roundabout. I like to see them and the frame's still there, the metal frame for them. Now, I'd like to see if we could do something more about the main street with the gardens. I mean, the petunias and things look very nice, but underneath the trees, there's that native grass and it doesn't look real attractive, and I'd like to see if we can do something a bit more attractive in there and make the street pretty. That's me. I like things that are nice and pretty, so they're just a little few things I'd like to bring up tonight. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Betty, and we appreciate you letting us know that. And even if you did before you went, if you just give us a list of those signs or let us know, so we make sure we've got it right. And I know as when you first said about the boundary sign, I heard one of the councillors say that's right, so we'll certainly need to get something fixed there, but I appreciate your contribution. Well, that being the end of the open forum, I now open our council meeting for today, the 11th of December, last meeting for 2018, and I'd like to wish all of our ratepayers, community members and everyone here tonight, and councillors, council staff and workers, a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year, and hopefully we've got a big year in 2019 coming up. I'd just like to acknowledge do acknowledgement to country. Council acknowledges the Wiradjuri people, the traditional custodians of the land, of which the meeting is held, and pays its respect to elders both past and present of the Wiradjuri nation, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people who are present. Apologies, we got Councillor Stewart. And just before we start with the meeting itself, I'd like, on behalf of myself and the councillors and the staff, and I'm sure the communities of both Gundagai and Cootamundra, extend our condolences to Councillor Graham and his family, and for the passing today of his sister Gail. So, Councillor Graham, if you can pass it on for us, thank you to your family and Gail's family, and she was a great lady. So, yeah, please accept our condolences. Right, the confirmations of the minutes for last meeting. I need any questions there before we...
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move them as true and correct.
Someone like to second that? Moved to Councillor Phillips, second to Councillor Bowden. All in favour? Aye, carry. I'll just do the mayoral minutes, and then what we are going to do is change the order. Paul. Yes, that's number. What we're going to do, we've got our auditor here today, and auditors today, and represented by one of the partners of the business, John O'Malley. And John's got a fair way to travel after this 2.5 hours. So what we're going to do is now move the auditor's report up to before the mayoral minutes. So someone would like to move that way that we do that. Move Councillor Palmer, second to Councillor Sheen. All in favour? John, if you'd like to come up.
Apologies, the presentation right over your head, but
No, we can go there.
I'll move through it relatively quickly. If you do have questions, please stop me and ask as that occurs here. It's not necessarily a formal presentation. What I'm going to talk about is what things are significant about the financial statements. I'd love to get a microphone here.
We'll have a look at the operating result, where your income came from, where it was spent, the level of cash and investments, some of the ratios which are used for the comparison of councils, some general observations and the audit opinion. So in the 2018 year, I guess the first thing most people want to know is what the operating result was, and it's quite a change from last year. We've had a deficit in the current year of just over 7 million. We look at the operating result in two contexts though as well, because we look at the bottom line operating result, but we also look at the result before capital amounts, because when there's significant capital funding, it can sometimes mask the underlying results. So the result before capital amounts was a deficit of 9.376. Talking of those capital and operating funding though, that was certainly one of the things that boosted last year's results. So we had the early payment of the 2018 instalments, the first two instalments for the 2018 year of the Federal Financial Assistance Grant. $2.4 million were paid early in the 2017 year. There was the merger implementation fund of 5 million. There was the Stronger Communities grant of 10 million. And all three of those items contributed to the result last year, and obviously didn't feature again this year. We also had the situation this year that there's a requirement under the accounting standards and also under the Office of Local Government's Code of Practice that infrastructure assets be revalued on a regular basis. And the 2018 year, it was the turn of the operational land and buildings. And the result of that was that there was a decrease in the value of operational land of about 1.3 million. Now, for most councils that haven't been subject to a merger, over previous years when the value of land has gone up, there's an entry goes through to the asset revaluation reserve, and if it goes down, it can go first back against that before it hits your operating result. But because Cootamundra-Gundagai was a merged council, there was no accumulated asset revaluation reserve from prior years. So the decrease went straight against your operating result. So it's another one of those sort of one-off impacts that has had an impact upon the 2018 year result. The other thing in looking at the figures, it is important to remember that the 2017 year wasn't a 12-month period. It was from that 13th of May proclamation date, so that the comparative figures aren't representative of a 12-month ordinary operating year. So looking at the result, that's just a graphical depiction. For the last 2 years, you've got the red section is the operating result before capital amounts, and the blue section is the after capital amounts. And we're talking generally in terms of all funds combined, but just for the purposes of the exercise, I put the results up there for each of the individual funds, and you can see that the water fund had a small surplus in the 2017 year before capital amounts, a little bit more this year, so 306,000 before capital last year and 820,000 this year. No capital funding in the water fund, so it was the same result both before and after capital. In the sewer fund, the same story. We've got a surplus before capital of 740,000 this year, down from a deficit the previous year. So both water and sewer funds produced surpluses, and the deficit was wholly in the general fund. Looking at where the income came from, the rates income a little bit up on the previous year, and did reflect just the difference between the two operating periods, the apportionment for the extra month this year, last year. So just over 7 million in income coming from rates. Annual charges were down a little bit, 5.9 million last year versus 5.3 this year. grants and contributions of operating nature were halved. I mean, 16 million last year, which was extraordinarily high, and 8.5 million this year. Capital grants, similarly, just under 10 million last year and just under 2.3 this year. User charges, which are the charges that council levies for the water consumption, access to the sewerage service, but also the works that we might do for the RMS on state-owned roads. They came in at just over 6 million, 6,090,000 this year. Interest revenue was just over $1 million, and other revenue, which was made up of things like the gain on sale of assets, stood at 1.5. So total revenue this year was at 31,777,000, but last year, with the impact of all of those big contributors, was 48 million. So the other side of the equation, where it was spent, and the typical standout features of the big three, which are employees, materials and depreciation, and that's very much the case here. So again, bearing in mind that the 2017 year represented a little bit more than a 12-month period. So employee costs were up a bit on the previous year. Materials were well up. There was a big consumption of materials, and also use of contractors in delivering the works program. And depreciation was down a little, partially reflecting the revaluation of assets last year, but also again reflecting just the mismatch in the periods. Borrowing costs were minimal at 144,000, and other expenses this year was the biggest chunk of that. I think would have been the decrease on the revaluation, that $1.3 million reduction in the values. It also includes things like street lighting, utilities, insurance costs. So total operating expenses were at 38,856,000, down from 43.5 million last year. Looking at your levels of cash and investments, the overall cash and investments at the end of the year stood at 34,471,000, and there's a couple of slices to that pie. So you've got on the left the 2017 figures, and obviously we've used some of those cash and investments in delivering some of the projects that have been rolled out over the past 12 months. And on the right, we've got the 2018 result. And you can see that we've broken it into three segments. And starting from the bottom, the yellow segment is the internally restricted funds. And that's what council itself, through the budgeting process, sets out as reserves. So that includes things like the advance payment, I know, of the FAGS grant, which was the $2 million is in there. Things like the carry forward works, the employee leave entitlements, those sorts of things are all included in those internal restrictions. And so, although we've got some flexibility in how those are used, we generally sort of adopt that at the budgeting stage, and how it's going to be used. The next segment up is the red segment on the chart, and that represents the externally restricted funds. And so that's things like the water and sewer money. There's about $11 million of that is water and sewer money, which can only be used for those purposes. And it also is any unexpended capital grants or unexpended borrowings, developer contributions, those types of monies where we are able to use them only for the purposes that we obtain them. So whether that's water or sewer money or grant fundings which were received for a particular purpose, we can't change the use of those funds easily. So they're externally restricted. And then the cap on top, which this year stood at about 916,000, is the unrestricted funds, and that basically is the buffer which leaves a little bit of flexibility to deal with unexpected costs that may emerge, and also provides that buffer from dipping into externally or internally restricted funds in delivering our budget. Moving on to the ratios, the ratios themselves, I think, are partially useful for comparison, but in a lot of cases they need to have a bit of context surrounding them in order to make sense of them. So the operating performance ratio, which is largely a measure of, well, how well did we maintain our expenditure within our income. That's saying, okay, we had an operating income of X amount and we had expenditure of Y amount. If Y exceeds X, then we end up with a negative figure. And if it's less than X, it's a positive figure. Now, I guess in a perfect world, you'd say, well, we don't want to spend more than we earn. But as we've just seen, there were some enormous amounts of money came in last year, and a lot of that's been turned around and spent in this year. So it's a bit of a timing mismatch, really. And so we've, not unsurprisingly, we had a positive result last year and we've got a negative result this year. So I think of itself, the fact that we've got a negative result isn't inherently a bad thing. It simply reflects the realities of delivering on the money that was received last year and spent this year. So although the OLG benchmark target is a 0% outcome where we spend only exactly what we generate, I don't think that allows for the timing of differences. The next one is the own source operating revenue, and here the purpose is to, the benchmark is set at 60%, and the objective is that the councils will generate at least 60% of their income out of the sources that they control, so from the rates and the user charges and the annual charges and the like. And you can see that in the 2018 year we achieved that. We actually came in at 65.28%. And in the previous year, again, it looks like, oh, it wasn't such a good year, it was a bad thing, we didn't achieve that. But as I think I would have said to you last year, with that amount of external funding coming in, you'd have to raise a hell of a lot of water and sewer charges to make 60% of your income up on top of that. So as a ratepayer, I'd probably like to see this one typically below the line, because it means that you're milking the federal and state government for money more so than the ratepayer. So there again, I think some context is important, but by the measure, we've exceeded the benchmark. The unrestricted current ratio, it's a measure that's designed to try and say, well, how quickly and easily can council pay its debts? We looked previously at the level of cash and investments, and we noted that 16 million of that was externally restricted, so our hands are tied. So it's sort of taken out of your short-term assets, and we're saying, okay, of the remaining assets that are likely to be realised in the next 12 months, how many dollars of short-term asset do we have to meet $1 of short-term equivalent liability? The benchmark set at $1.50, but we've come in at $5.40. And so again, we're comfortably indicating we've got sufficient liquidity. We can pay our debts as and when they fall due. The debt service cover ratio is a little bit more confusing. It's trying to say, out of your operating income, adjusted for sort of some one-off measures and tweaked in any number of other ways, how many times over would that repay the principal and interest on your borrowings? Now, council's borrowings aren't excessive. I think off the top of my head, it's around about 3 million. We'll see on a slide that comes up. So it's not representing a massive imposition on council meeting the repayment of that. But because we had the one-off effects this year, we've come in with a ratio that's beneath the benchmark. So the benchmark set at 2 times that you should be covering that 2 times over. We've come in less than that, but you can see that last year we were nearly at 20 times. So I think we need to get to a period where we've got a more normal operating period to really start to make much meaning out of that measure. So again, looking at the contrast between the two, I don't think you can draw much in the way of conclusions about that measure just yet. That's the external debt, and yes, it stood at just over $3 million. It's come down from 3.4 million the previous year. So you can see there's been some pretty steady reduction in that level of borrowings. So in terms of the findings, we report to the audit office, who actually issue the reports, and there's multiple reports. There's a set of consolidated accounts on all of council's funds is the main document. There's also special purpose statements which cover the water and sewer funds. There's special schedules which cover other information. There's rating returns. There's a number of audit reports, all of those issued without qualification. So there was the reporting was seen to be true and fair. We recommend it to council just because of the way things were coming together. They seek an extension for the lodgement of the financial statements, which we did. And they were lodged inside that extended period. So from the OLG perspective, all of the reporting requirements were met. When we conduct the audit, we will raise issues with the management in a couple of ways. We are just in conversation as issues are raised, and in an exit interview when we leave the premises, but also more formally through a management letter which comes back and sort of raises issues and continues to sort of report them until they're resolved. And in our dealings with Cootamundra-Gundagai Council, those matters have been getting progressively dealt with, and and taken on board. So the appropriate sort of responses that have been given there. So we'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of the council staff, because it's obviously it's been a difficult year with quite a bit of turnover, and they're using an external contractor to prepare the accounts, and many hands sort of on the wheel. But in spite of all of that, everything got done, and the work was completed to a standard that enabled it to be audited. So we'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the council staff in achieving that. Having covered those points, though, if there's any questions on the audit or the financial statements, I'd be happy to take them.
John, I might ask a question if you don't mind. Throughout the audit, was there any identification of any breaches of council policy?
The audit itself, the focus is on the financial statements as a whole. So we're dealing with the materiality that applies to the financial statements as a whole. So we're looking at materiality in the context of $35 million of expenditure. So it's a fairly high bar. So not specifically through the audit, certainly prior to the sign-off of the audit, and in consultation with the audit office, there's been additional scrutiny applied, obviously, to credit card usage and to the procurement practices. But at this point, there's been no report on those as yet. So it wasn't seen that either of those things would have an impact upon the financial statements, so they were issued as they stood.
Thank you.
John, did you find anything funny about the plant fund in relation to the profitability of the plant fund, where we've gone backwards substantially in our plant fund? Were things being done correctly from an audit perspective in relation to costings and how the plant fund should work? Off the top of my head, I'm not recalling. I'd have to go back to the management letter on that one to see. I mean, we look at plant utilisation and the reporting, and I know that there were councils where we were reporting on some of the exception reporting and that sort of thing, but I can't recall specifically for Cootamundra whether or not it was one of them. Yeah, well, this is the first year since I've been on council that we've had a negative result and a deficit in our plant fund. I would have thought that would have raised issues with the auditor, where they would have thought, well, what is going on here?
I'd have to refer back to the file though, to answer your question.
Any other questions?
There's no, yes, Councillor Grant?
Yeah, from a perspective of, losses and income, really at the end of the day, what I would have thought as council we're trying to focus on is you get a certain amount of cash a year and you really only got that certain amount of cash to spend. So it's like a household budget in local government, trying to deliver services to the community and maintain assets and those types of things. So if you've got any suggestions, I asked this question last year, in relation to page 3 of our financial statements, the net operating result before grants and contributions for capital purposes, where you back those out, we end up with a $9 million loss for the 18 years. So we've effectively come up $9 million more, including depreciation, I acknowledge, but than what we had to spend. And then last year was only 4.8, and then some of our budget projections, which I don't know whether you have a look at those going forward, our 10-year plan or our community plan. But have you any suggestions, given your experience in local government, as what we should be doing?
I suppose in that one, the difficulty is that you've got a set of financial statements which have got to be prepared in accordance with international financial reporting standards, which are designed for multinational companies, not for local government. You've got a budget that you adopt largely on a cash basis, which is really what your steering document as far as your quarterly reporting and how you as a council sort of administer the funds. And the two are quite different. So as you've noted, I mean, yes, there's $8 million worth of depreciation in the current operating result. There's the write down in the value of the real estate assets, of $1.4 million that's hitting the results here. That's not something which would have been known or could be budgeted for at the point that you adopted your budget, but it has had a direct impact upon your operating result here. Similarly, with the timing of the FAGS payments, council has no control over those. It's difficult to try and reconcile the external financial reports, which are drawn up on one basis, with your budget, which is done on another. So all I can say is I would run the council by your budget, not by the financial statements that are the scorecard at the end of the year.
John, why do you think that we were over the 60% in terms of our own income, and like what is the implication of that? I mean, it just seems really good.
The short answer to that is you didn't get as much in the way of grant funding, so that when you get a lot of grant funding, the proportion of your income that's come out of your own sources is diluted, so there's less. And this year there wasn't as much grant funding, so your own source income went back up.
That doesn't mean that we've got enough money, though, does it?
It's not really measuring the volume of money. It's just
the percentage.
Where did it come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the mix?
Yeah. Good.
Any other questions, councillors? There's no other questions, John. We'd like to thank you very much for coming down. I know it's got a 2.5 hour trip to come down and go back. So we appreciate the work you do for council, and thank you for your report here tonight.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd just like to express a thank you. I know John's been doing the accounts for Cootamundra Shire for, I think we spoke earlier, 15 years or more. He's been around as long as I have, and Councillor Palmer, just like to express thank you for all the time and work he's done over those years. Thanks, Mr.
That's certainly reiterated by other councillors, I'm sure. So thanks for that, Councillor Phillips. Thank you, and a safe trip back, John. We'll just have a recommendation to move the John's audit report. It's moved Councillor Palmer, seconded Councillor Bowden. All in favour? Carried. All right, the item 6 is the mayoral minutes there. I won't read them all out. I think you all see, and people in the audience got the minutes. The only one that there for myself not on is I attended with Steph Cook a meeting of the Australian Heritage Group, Truck Group, at their meeting on Sunday evening in Gundagai. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, 7th of December, the fees and charges workshop was cancelled.
Right, yep. So someone, if there's no other comment, moved Councillor Phillips, seconded Councillor Palmer. They be accepted. All in favour? Carried. There's no. Now on to the General Manager.
Item 8.1.1 is the Stock and Bingle Elwood Hall Section 355 Committee meeting minutes. The recommendation there is that they be received and noted.
Move Councillor Bowden, second Councillor Graham. All in favour?
Item 8.1.2 is the, we've just dealt with that, my apologies, that's a presentation of the audit. Item 8.1.3 is a application for an RV friendly town for Cootamundra. Report's been put together and we're seeking a recommendation that council approve that for submission and before we forward it to the Caravan and Motorhome Club of Australia for assessment.
Any comment there at all?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it was suggested to me, as everybody would be aware, that Gundagai is an RV-friendly town, but in my workplace it was suggested that a good form of measure, I guess, for the people who travel in RVs is an erection of a box a receipt box that people physically put their receipts into this box of purchases that they have made in the local community, and it gives a measure and confirmation that this initiative is worthwhile to the community as a whole. And my understanding is that it is done in many other places as well. So
Yeah, that certainly is. I think it's a great suggestion. As you said, it's a great measure to show that they're well warranted. And I think even without receipts in Gundagai, as you agreed, Penny and David, it's certainly they're a great asset, a great facility and a great asset and benefit to the economy. The sooner we can get one here, I think the better. So is there any questions there, or someone like to move that way? Move, Councillor Shane, second to Councillor Nicholson. All in favour?
Item 8.1.4 is the monthly finance report for November 2018.
Questions?
Yeah, just on Tim Swan, the plant replacement program is one of Council's main priorities and work is ongoing. Is that part of correcting the issues that we had last year where we ran at a loss and we're getting the costings right? So that employers are costing their jobs correctly to the plant fund and whatever's got happened there?
Yeah, that's the main source of our concern, yeah. And we were hopeful of having something to the workshop last night, but the other matters going on have delayed that, unfortunately, but it's certainly one of our main priorities.
Just through the chair, if I could. Tim, on page 48, in regards to the new servers and replacing of damaged equipment, adjustment to the budget report in December QBR. Am I reading that right? A significant overrun there.
My understanding, it was a completely unforeseen event. There was some damage relating to building works, so the servers were damaged and had to be replaced.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
If I
So, sorry, Tim, with page 46, Neil, sad face with disposal of assets down 50,000, or what disposable assets would what assets would we dispose of to get that income? How do we budget for that? What are we thinking?
the general manager acting general manager might like to comment on that, but it would be when we trade in items of plant that have reached the end of their useful lives. As for how that figure was reached, it was provided by the former director of that area.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, on page 47, and it's probably directed to Tim, down on the line executive office, there's 647,000 in the actual, 214 in the budget, a short or overspend of 433, but it's got misallocation of legal expenses. Does that mean they've been put in, or are they going to be taken out?
They were coded there when they should have been coded somewhere else. So we've got a number of corrections of that sort of nature that need to be made. Rather than doing them bit by bit, we've wanted to make corrections as one lot. They were planned for October, but again with some disruption there.
So what you're saying is that the next one we get, it should be back the other way, so it'll actually
balance it out.
Yeah, and it should have been coded somewhere else, so it should be elsewhere in the report. It's just skewing that percentage.
Thank you.
Just through the chair, then, if that's extra $400 and something thousand there, in the annual report, it was also about 159,000. So is that right? We've spent about 600,000 on legal costs this year.
That same line, you mean?
Councillor Kelly, I don't believe it's all legal costs. If you read, it's misallocation of legal expenses and wages, and the same question was asked at the October meeting because it was identified in the October meeting, and as Tim correctly said, they haven't gone to the trouble of allocating it out to the right cost sheet. So it would be a bit of a summation to say that we've spent $600,000 on legal fees. Yeah.
Any other questions there?
Yeah, I have one. Just the on the capital expenditure. The money spent on our civic centre. Where is that showing in that capital expenditure page? Or is it still missing?
I believe that's in. I'm not sure if it's in buildings or other structures, but I can.
It's definitely in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's definitely in there. Yeah, I can get back to you about that one though. It's certainly included though.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask on page 49 for everybody, am I correct in reading that outstanding rates is just over $3.5 million?
That would be right. For a long time, there was no debt recovery policy in place. That went into that came in a few months ago, and we're just getting. We've appointed a debt collection agency, and they're just getting into gear at the moment, starting to make some progress on that. But we've been unable to chase any debts without a policy in place.
But also the 3.6 includes the last two, last two quarterly instalments.
Yeah, that's right.
So, what happens for Councillor Nicholson's purposes? You see the billed amount there, 6.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's the total billing of the general rate.
Yeah, and
for the year,
and the amount that
comes in over 4 payments most of the time.
The amount that's overdue is more like 7%.
Yeah. Could I suggest, through the chair, Mr. Mayor, that if we could, on that page there, if we could have a report on overdues like we used to get on the old Gundagai Shire.
Always overdue, man.
Yeah, I just think that's important.
Shouldn't be hard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd like to move that report. Move Councillor Graham, second to Councillor Kelly. All in favour? Carried.
Item 8.1.5 is Australia Day awards for 2019. The information contained in the report is for receival and noting.
There is a press release also going out, I think, in the papers tomorrow. It's Gundagai and the Herald. So. A recommendation, move Councillor Palmer, second to Councillor Bowden. All in favour?
Just on that recommendation, Mr. Mayor, do we have a date, or are we going to set a date so that we don't end up in the situation like we did last year, where we basically were only a week or so away from the awards and we're giving the award? I just think you need to give people time so that families have got time to get organised if they're different ones are going to have received the award.
Yeah, because normally our December meeting it's always later, and these are closed, and we make it in the December meeting. Good question, because our January meeting's not till. I think we need to have an extraordinary meeting.
There's
second week of February.
There's a bit of history there as well. Cootamundra announces theirs by surprise on Australia Day. That's been their way of doing it. Gundagai has done it the opposite. We've put it in the newspaper before Christmas so everyone knows who the recipients are. So I guess you can meet and determine both awards, but you'll have to work out whether you want to continue with those traditions.
I think I would in Gundagai anyway. That way, because people, I think like David said, it helps people know who's getting the awards and their family come along. And we could actually, like, they close next week, so there's no reason why we can't meet prior to Christmas.
Yeah, there's no reason why we can't follow both traditions. We'll just have to have a meeting beforehand and make the decision.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Graham, like last year we actually did meet and it was within time and people were notified if they were recipients, so they would be at the...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can meet next
You might be right. It might have been the year before.
Yeah, it was the year before.
They close on Monday.
That's probably my only concern, Mr. Mayor. It's not a lot of time from now to then, and we've only just done the press release, and it's coming out tomorrow. I don't know whether
it has been out on the website. I don't know. Was it advertised in the papers too? Yeah. Yeah. So I think it has been out there. So do we want to make a day next week to meet?
Yes.
I think we need to, yeah.
So staff will
What
collate
school
all the
nights?
information ready and distribute it via email to make it easier for people to read it before they get to the meeting.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Mr. Mayor, can we do a proxy vote, respond with email, because I'm out of action next week and the week after.
Oh yeah, it's going to be an extraordinary meeting, but I don't think we can have proxy votes. I'm just having a look to see what days might suit with the calendar. With school presentations. Anyone got these up? I've got to remember how to get in there again. Can't play some music there, Marianne, or something, can you, for a second? Someone tell a joke? Or...
How's the day after Tuesday?
Pardon?
How's Tuesday the 18th suit people?
No, I got a school presentation that night.
Good on Christmas Eve about 5 o'clock. Oh, yeah. The problem is, Mr. Mayor, we say close on the 17th. You get count the pensions, there'll be another 6 turn up on the Tuesday.
Yeah, well, how about...
Thursday.
What about Wednesday?
Mr. Mayor, while you're looking at your calendar to fill in time, can I make a suggestion that next year for the Australia Day 2020 awards that we get the advertising and everything happening in early November?
Totally agree.
So that we
Totally agree.
we are doing with an enclosed committee at this meeting next year.
Wednesday at 5 o'clock. See. Gundagai is our next meeting, so is everyone, is it 5 o'clock all right at Gundagai? You're right, Dave? Yeah. Yeah. When next Wednesday? 5 o'clock. Someone like to move that way? Move Councillor Nicholson, second to Councillor Graham. All in favour? Carried.
Item 8.1.7 is the Cootamundra Heritage Centre Section 355 Committee meeting minutes.
No, we've got the waste, mate. Go back.
Oh, my apologies.
We're going to have to buy you some links.
8.1.6 Waste Amnesty Days for Cootamundra and Gundagai. Councillor Kelly raised this at a meeting some time ago, but we couldn't find a record of it for some reason. So we've included it in tonight's report for you to consider.
I've got no problem with those days. I do think probably coming into spring it'd be.
If I can, Mr Mayor, I just thought for the benefit of the Gundagai ratepayers, a couple of years ago, Cootamundra used to hand out free tip day vouchers in the rates notices, which were always used and they got stopped using. But the problem is a lot of people don't actually own the house they live in, so they don't receive the rate notice, whether they be a housing commission house or a private rent. And a lot of these people, investors, live in Sydney, and those vouchers are going out of town, so they don't go to the people that are living there. That's why I thought it'd be easier if we can just do the weekends at the start of each season.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best idea. Then it's uniform. You know when it is, you know when to do it.
But I just also, I don't believe we should be making available the builder's rubble. It's all right for, and we don't want truckloads of people waiting on Fridays to bring it down to the free tip day on the weekend.
So those dates seem right to everyone to go with, to start with? Like Ms Kelly, you'd like to move that late? Councillor Kelly, move Councillor Kelly, second to Councillor Phillips. We all in favour?
8.1.7, the Cootamundra Heritage Centre, Section 355 Committee meeting minutes.
There's no recommendations.
Details of committee office bearers are attached with those minutes.
Recommendation noted, Mr. Mayor.
Recommendation, move Councillor Phillips, second to Councillor Palmer, all in favour? Carried.
Item 8.1.8 is the Cootamundra Showground Users 355 Committee meeting minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question about that. It just says the confirmation of quorum. There are 14 members appointed to this committee. My understanding is that members of 355 committee should be between 4 and 12 members. So that committee is actually oversubscribed.
I believe that committee is made up of the users groups. So even though it does go over the recommendation of 4 to 12, it still services that facility.
I'm going to have to take that on notice. I'm not sure whether there is a rule for the maximum number on a 355 committee. If there is, I'll report it back to the next meeting. But
Yes, I received that. Recommendation that the report being received and noted. So I'd like to second that. Second to Councillor Phillips, all in favour? $50.63, mate.
item 8.1.9 is the information bulletin. We put it within the council report as requested by councillors last meeting. And if there's any items on that you'd like to raise, do so.
Mate, a lot of those
Information noted.
yeah, I think they're all self-explanatory. Moves Councillor Phillips, second to Councillor Palmer. All in favour? The action report. I think there's some on this we could start to knock off too.
I've got to say the action report is probably a couple of weeks old without any updates. So there may be some additional comments to come back on the next council meeting.
It's only been 2 weeks since we met.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just the, I haven't got the page, but just the Aboriginal representatives, we've talked about that a lot. So that's complete.
Yeah.
That's over. That can go off.
We'll do a review of all the items, and if anything is complete, we'll just take it off the list and present you with outstanding issues.
couple one things going to be talked about later. Waste services. The aircraft fuel depot, that's still just ongoing, is it? Our Lempole one.
Yeah, as far as I know, there hasn't been any action on that in the last couple of months.
The containerised fuel tanks for the depots fixed up because there was an issue at Gundagai there a few weeks ago trying to get fuel.
They've been fueled.
Is that been fueled and going?
There's no fuel in them yet, but they've awarded, they've got the appropriate quotes and they've selected a supplier, and that supplier has been tasked with bringing fuel in. So 20,000 litres will come in to start us off with, and 1,000 litres of AdBlue.
Mr. Mayor, a question to Mark. This is the Muddimer Creek walking tracks grants. Grant applications have been made. Who does grants for walking tracks?
Through the chair, that would Miriam's been working on some of those, and depends which areas they're working on. So yeah, we can offer it.
Yeah, the primary grant person at the moment is Miriam in council. However, if there's a specific grant, say for RMS funding for cycleways, then we would have people like road safety officers preparing grant applications. But anything you want to know, just sing out.
The West Street roundabout, I think it's getting pretty well down pat now. As we know, it's not going to be a roundabout.
Yeah, channelized intersection, and the designs have been refined to a bare minimum, and that document has now been released to all the people that provided information through the public exhibition phase. To just, I guess, reiterate that we've taken on board all those comments that the community had, and we're taking final comments now.
I spoke basically the majority of ones that had comments, and they're all happy with the change in what they've done, what Tim's done. Any other questions?
Yeah, have we had a reply from Mr. Donoghue at Coolman Council regarding the Internal Audit Committee and getting involved in that?
Yeah, that should be all set. We should have received the letter that they accepted us. I presume we've answered that. They were trying, I think I might have mentioned last meeting, they were trying to get Bland in with us too, but they're happy to take us on board, yeah.
So what's our next step? When are we going to get involved?
Well, when their next meeting is. I think it's early or not till February. But I've indicated to Tony and to Terry Kiss that we want to do the catch-ups modules. So they'll arrange that when they're ready. But everything's okay. They approved us. So it'll be good to be part of.
I understand Ian Roberts is preparing, he's the internal auditor, he's preparing documentation ready for our first audit. So.
It's through the chair, if I could, page 92, 8.4.3, is that progressing as we'd hoped? Top of the page. 8.4.3, Phil.
Oh, kilowatts.
I know, but is it stacking up the way we expected?
Yeah, project manager is Bill Moore, and I had a meeting with Bill this afternoon, and he said killards are going quite well. There's a couple of issues to be resolved in regard to service lines and a contractual difference of opinion, but as far as I know, works are progressing well. We're actually keeping a detailed map as work progresses, and I'm happy to share that map with councillors so you can see works in progress, what's coming up next. And
just through the mayor, I think that'd be good actually to share with the media so the ratepayers can see actually how it's progressing.
Yep, well, that's what our project engineer's doing. So he's preparing monthly updates for management, and that can be passed out through the media sources.
No other questions on the action group? Move Councillor Palmer, second Councillor Sheen. All in favour?
Item 8.2.1 is a draft liquid trade waste policy for council. We do have Les Mum, who heads up that section in the room, and he's available to answer any specific questions.
Just regarding, and the reason I want to say, when you say Gundagai takes on Coota's fees, what's the change to Gundagai's fees? So if some, like the recommendation is the fees and charges for liquid waste applying to Cootamundra for 218-27 have been included in the 219-20 fees and charges for both Cootamundra and Gundagai. So compared to what Gundagai is now to what they will be, if you can just, that's the main thing. I tried to look at it, it's a bit different on how it's written out. Yeah, but no, I mean, is Gundagai going up or are they coming down, or, you know, because they're already pay that 300 extra for access charge. Just, so do you know what the difference is there, Les?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. The fees currently for Gundagai are on volume only, and there's no incentive there to treat the outlet. So we want an incentive scheme as per the government requisite or the government statutory policy. The actual depends on the volume, so it's a bit hard to say, but it would be brought back to council in terms of fees and charges as part of the next budget. So the council would make a determination on that for the implementation of those charges for the 2019-2020 year. I can't give you that exact figure right now tonight, but there are no charges for Cootamundra at the moment. In fact, sorry, I'll take that back. No one is paying anything in Cootamundra at the moment, even though there are fees and charges, but they haven't been implemented. So the only ones that are paying at the moment are Gundagai. There's 111 assessments. The
Gundagai paying
Gundagai, Mr. Mayor, Gundagai are paying trade waste charges at the moment. Cootamundra aren't. The income for the first quarter was $27,934, and for the second quarter, $29,645. So just under $60,000 being collected in the first 2 quarters of this year. So you'd say roughly $120,000 a year from those 111 assessments in Gundagai.
So there's 60,000 of trade waste now being collected in Gundagai, nothing out of Coota.
No. And one of the reasons why we want to bring this policy in, obviously, is to make it equitable, equitable across all users. But also what happens is that if they're not charged, a commercial business is then discharging waste into our sewage system, or council sewage system, and ratepayers are paying to treat that. So the ratepayers are subsidising the commercial businesses. So it's fair. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, Joy.
So it's fair to implement a policy that the people who create the waste pay for the treatment of that waste, and have it across the board so that not some of the people in Gundagai pay and some of the people in Cootamundra don't pay, which is unfair as well.
So at the present time, what you're saying, Gundagai is subsidising the trade waste for 60-odd thousand and Coota's not paying any.
Gundagai is actually, on average assessments is $1,082 per assessment. Yeah. $120,000 a year. Cootamundra is zero. And how many potential assessments will be raised in Cootamundra?
I asked that, through you, Mr. Chair, I asked that question today, and they couldn't tell me because we're not sure how many businesses. I'd have to have someone go around and actually do a check on that, because not all businesses have trade waste and would be. So it's not a matter of just going and counting how many shops there are, and there's different categories too. So it's a little bit complicated, but the basic principle is everybody should pay who are creating waste, and they shouldn't be subsidised by the ratepayers.
So but likely there'd be a lot more in Cooter than Gundagai if you go on the same type of businesses that are paying it in. Or is there one business in Gundagai that's paying a lot more?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the area well enough to be able to answer that question for you, to be honest, but I would think that there would be at least the same as Gundagai, if not more. It was said to me today that, you know, Gundagai is a pretty busy area in there, and so there might be, you know, more, but I think it would be, you know, there'd have to be fair to say they'd be roughly the same. So roughly you could double it, and when you do the quick numbers there, you're looking at about, you know, $250,000 a year in income, which could be used to administer the policy and go around and work with the shopkeepers in terms of giving them advice and information about how they can best treat their sewage, because the object is, one, is an equitable system, and number two is minimising the waste that's going into our sewage system, the untreated waste. So from an environmental point of view, we want to do it properly. We want to abide by the council by the state policies, and that gives you the opportunity then to get that Section 60 certificate, and opens up grant opportunities for the council.
So the Cooter people are paying liquid trade waste fees now.
Mr. Mayor, no.
Yeah, well, how come you say fees and charges for liquid trade waste applying to Cootamundra in 2018-19 be included in the 2019-20 fees and charges for both Cooter and Gundagai sewage works? Cooter's on,
yeah, Mr. Mayor, there is a charge that's in the fees and policy for council, but it's never been implemented in Cootamundra. I don't know why. I'm only new here, but there is a fee, and it is based on the correct model. So that fee is a fair fee, but it hasn't been implemented. There is a fee for Cootamundra that has been implemented, and they've been paying for, for Gundagai, and they've been paying for a number of years.
So since the merger, Gundagai has been paying trade waste, but Cooter isn't.
Correct.
I think that's real fair, honestly.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask of Les, looking forward, what is the process of identification of those people that in Cootamundra that are not paying for the disposal of trade waste? How do the process to identify those people that are not paying?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, staff would go to each shopkeeper and identify them and then inform them that they would have to put in an application. They have to be then assessed as to what category they fall in, a category 1, 2 or 3. The categories have various, different charges. The minimum is a category 1, which might be something like a newsagent. Category 2 could be a coffee shop. Category 3 could be a car wash where you have other pollutants and that go into the system. So you have to assess each application on merit and give it a category, and then from that category you can then tell them what their charges would be. So it would be up to staff to do that, to go around to each, and it's a good education policy for process to follow for them, to work with them. And you would be aware that there will be a certain amount of backlash against this because people don't like to pay new fees. But I think council's in a situation where they need to do this, and we need to have a very effective and broad-reaching education program to advise the people of what's coming up and why we're doing this.
But the fee for Cooter is in the fees and charges.
But it's never been implemented.
It's never been charged. I think they've had a bloody good run. When Gundagai's out, they've been paying. You got to. Is there any other fees and charges along the way that are in there and haven't been charged? Like, you got a fee and charge, and you say, "No, but we're not charging it." Well, why have it?
Mr. Mayor, I think reading there.
I'm not taking that against you, Lee.
I think what we're being told is that our staff haven't gone and knocked on doors and gone and done that to actually put them in their categories. So I think that's why it hasn't been charged. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would think that probably resourcing has been an issue. It's not something that you can do easily, and I would think that looking ahead, you can project that through, that there is income in this policy that would support the resources needed to implement it and then to manage that system. There is good, income in there that can then be put back into the management of your water systems, your water and sewerage systems, once it's implemented. But yes, resourcing would have been an issue.
Mr. Mayor, another question, if I may, to Les. Do we have a bit of a time frame as to the completion of this?
Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Chairman, I would think that you would want to get on, if the council agrees and adopts this, I would think that you would want to start implementing this education program early in the new year and give people plenty of time to get ready for it and to budget for it and to know what's coming. There'll be lots of questions. There'll be probably lots of grumpy people that we're going to have to deal with, and there's a lot of people there, and I don't have 20 staff that can go around and do it. There'll be 1 or 2 people that will do it. So I think as early as possible in the new year to give us plenty of time to bed it in.
Yeah, well, I think it's important. It's got to be done. Like, you can't be charging one town and not the other town. Like, fair enough. On the recommendation 3, the existing fees and charges for Gundagai liquid trade waste continue on the 30th of June. Well, why wouldn't you have that in? Like, really, if you're being fair, you'd be saying you don't charge them from now till we start all up again. But that's not the way. That's not how we do it. But it's surprising. Sorry, Councillor.
No, I just want to make a comment in terms of the education. I think it's really good that, you know, you'll be charged, but it is in keeping with the strategic plan that we're environmentally sound and our policies are good. So I think it's an excellent program.
And I definitely think it's got to definitely start from 1st of July as combined. If we haven't got it there, then Gundagai's got to be made exempt till we get it together.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, it highlights the reasons why we need to have these meetings on fees and charges. You're saying, like, it's not fair that Gundagai's not paying, but then we look back, it's not fair that Cootamundra-Gundagai is paying green waste, Gundagai isn't. So there's lots of anomalies all the way across that we need to work on.
It's like Gundagai's paying 300 series connection fee more than Cooter too. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but when one's getting, you know, I know in this case when the charge is in there to be charged, but it's not being charged. Anyway, so any other questions on that, or any questions to Les?
Just one, Mr. Mayor. How hard would it be for Tim, sorry to put more work on you, Tim, to find out how many charges are actually in our fees and charges that aren't currently being charged or fees aren't being collected?
I'm not sure how much work it'll be, but we can certainly look at it. Yeah.
It would be interesting before, and it's got to come back to council, I know, before we make a charge on this, going on the average volume that a business puts out, say in Gundagai now, to what they pay now to if we put a fee on later. You know, I don't think we'd want to be putting it up too much, you know, that if you go on volume.
Through the Mayor, can I just ask a question of Les? You say Gundagai is paying the trade waste, but they're purely and simply paying it on volumetric, so nothing in regards to the 3 or 4 categories.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, there's actually 2 categories at the moment in Gundagai, and it's on volume. I think
purely on water usage.
Yeah.
So it's.
But reading this document, when this is enshrined, it's going to be categorised as suspended solids and all sorts of contaminants and chemical residues.
And we have to do that to meet the state government's best practice framework.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So the implication will be Cooter's going to cop it big time, but Gundagai also is going to cop an increase.
Well, if you did it,
but if there's the reason why you have a couple of tiered charging system is if you choose not to put in a grease trap and you want council to clean the sewerage, you pay heavily. If you've got a grease trap in, you pay low. So there's an incentive there for people to treat their waste.
Through the chair, if I may, a question to Les. The implications on septic tanks across the council through this policy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, none. This is purely and simply trade waste from commercial businesses. It's not a residential charge.
Through the chair, if I could, and I know our water, and I spoke yesterday in our workshop about this, we already in Cootamundra, and I don't know what happens in Gundagai, there is a sewage charge, which is that everyone pays. So we're already paying some sort of volumetric sewage charge, even businesses in Cootamundra. Is that correct? I know if I get, and I'll use the example I used yesterday, if I buy 1,000 litres of water in, it costs me $1. But for every time it goes down the sewer, it costs me $1.20, which is the sewage access part of our water, of our rates. We have that on all residential. Is that not on businesses already in Cootamundra?
Yeah, there's access charges for the sewer network.
Which is volumetric.
For everyone. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So does that happen in Gundagai as well?
Yep.
To those businesses who are already paying
the waste? Yeah, there's access charges to the sewer network and there's a trade waste charge. So they're two separate charges.
If memory serves me right, I think in about 15 year, we implemented this trade waste policy in Gundagai, right? And
not best practice. Not best practice. No, does not meet best practice. Collects an income stream.
Yep.
For council and provides an incentive, I guess, for people to manage their trade waste, but it's not a resource hungry system. We don't go and do regular inspections. We're not counting the loads of pollutants. We're not doing any of that. It's purely based on your water consumption. Determines how much money you get paid that you have to pay. So it's a really easy system to implement with little or no resources required, and that's why the former Gundagai Shire implemented those many years ago. And it provides a good income stream and has done for a lot of years.
Mayor, just another thing in the thing, by obtaining the Section 60 certificate, by doing this, council is then eligible to apply for a grant up to 10 million from the Safe and Secure Water Program. Hurrah! So more bonuses by doing.
Really?
Yeah, that's good. Let's do that and get 10 million.
Yeah, the requirements to meet best practice aren't just a trade waste policy. It's one of 4 things that you need to have. Integrated water cycle management plan in place. You've got to have drought management plans, this plan, and once you're meeting best practice, you're eligible to apply for the Safe and Secure Water Fund material. Our council is certainly on the road to meeting best practice.
So the first recommendation here, which is that we adopt attachment A as it's attached. Through the chair, Les, is that model policy going to change much, or is it basically something we can implement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's a policy you can implement now. It's the model policy that's been put out by the government.
Have you got any idea, because you look at the discussion here at the back, of additional costs are likely to arise to our council development in the future policy, what type of costs do you think, additional costs, are we going to incur to implement this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there would be resourcing costs in terms of staff time. As I alluded to earlier, initially there'd be an upfront cost to council, but then when the charges are collected, those fees would support that well and truly. There'd be an education program cost first up in terms of letterboxing everyone, having maybe public meetings, but getting the word out there to people of what's happening, putting ads in the local paper, we put it on our website, but you'd have to have a number of information days because it's going to cause a bit of a furore with businesses. So to do it right, there would be that outlay. I can't give an exact dollar term, but you know, you'd have to at least employ at least one more staff to help with that, and that could be a ranger that could go around, and once that initial program is over, could be used for other things as well. So,
thanks, Lev. Any other questions? Does someone like to move the recommendation as is?
Well, do we move the recommendation as is, or do we move the recommendation that we have the policy implemented so that both Cootamundra and Gundagai are charged from the 1st of July 2019? Yep. Whereas that way that reads to me, it's still very open.
Through the chair, if I may, could we refer it through to the Fees and Charges Committee to make sure that the charge is aligned between both towns? The policy?
Yeah, I got no reason why I can't go to fees and charges. Les, would you be having input into this prior to that, but what?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, for the fees, yeah. Or when we do each, anyway, we have the council staff member there. I've got no worries referring the whole lot to the fees and charges, but we could have, if Councillor Graham did want to make a motion that it's recommendation that it's input.
Well, you've got to look at recommendation number 1, which says liquid trade policy be adopted.
Yep.
So that we're either going to adopt it or not. We can't really just send that to the fees and charges because we need to adopt that, I would have thought. So I've got no problem with the adoption of 1 to 4, but we need to state in there somewhere that both councils are subject to this from the 1st July 2019. And then maybe number 5 should be that as a council we refer it to the Fees and Charges Committee. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Actually, applying, but does the fees and charges for liquid trade waste applying to Cootamundra 2018-19? Oh no, it's not. Yeah, I think Councillor Graham, what you're saying. We can nearly take that.
So through the chair, the recommendation now will be what, as printed, 1 to 4 plus 0.5?
Mr Mayor, point 2 doesn't read right to me.
Yeah, I think it could nearly go, could it?
It's that point 2 is saying
charge Cootamundra fees.
that Cootamundra aren't paying anything.
So
No,
I'd be happy if you want to go that way. That's how I read it.
No, I think we need the money. So I would like to hand over to Councillor Sheen. How would you like that to read so that we can push it around to the committee?
In that first bit, that 2, shouldn't it be Gundagai, not Coota to start with?
That's our order.
Fees and charges for liquid trade waste applying to Gundagai in 2018-19, which is this financial year, being included in the 2019-20 fees and charges for both Cootamundra and Gundagai. And then that'll leave the fees and charges will be the same.
I think if council resolves to adopt the policy, and then that the policy be implemented by the Fees and Charges Committee.
But what we're getting a recommendation there from council, which is basically saying to the Fees and Charges Committee, we want you to charge what Gundagai is charging now, and that will go over. That'll be everyone. Like we try to, as a Fees and Charges Committee, we're trying to achieve. Right?
No.
Please, because of volume.
Through Mr. Chair, the fees that Gundagai are charging at the moment aren't correct. They're just a straight volume fee and they don't comply. The fees that have been calculated for the Cootamundra policy, even though they're not implemented,
charged, I'm with you.
they are still the fees and charges for Cootamundra, and they're correctly calculated. I apologise for the wording if it's a little bit misleading.
I'm just thinking about them being ones that are charged.
But they're in the fees and charges for Cootamundra. They just haven't been implemented, and they're the ones that we're saying the Fees and Charges Committee should look at as a baseline.
I think I agree, Charlie. We probably should look at them because, if we apply those Coota ones to an average Gundagai one now, is it going to make them go up a lot, or is it going to make them go? Yeah, I'm with you there.
That's why I'm saying, council can adopt the policy now, and then the fees and charges will implement it.
Yeah.
Can I suggest that you need to include number 4, but in your recommendation, because we need to start moving on it now and stuff.
So for Mary Ann's sake, I will move that council adopts the fees and charges policy.
Number one.
Liquid trade waste policy.
Yeah, the liquid trade waste policy.
Adopt the four of them, aren't we?
Oh, keep
We're going to adopt the four, mate.
keep them all in, and the policy will be then implemented by the Fees and Charges Committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
To start from the 1st of July. They start from the 1st of July.
Or fees associated with the policy will be implemented by the Fees and Charges Committee.
Or should it be included in the 1920 financial year fees and charges?
The Mayor will send you an email.
Well, even on this way, Gundagai's only going to be charged till the 30th anyway. Yeah, so if Coota's not in line, we'd certainly look at it then. But anyway. You've got that? Move, Council, yeah, go on, Councillor Graham.
Well, should there be an additional recommendation there that we apply resources to be in a position to implement it in Cootamundra by the 30th of June? Because going on what Les said, he needs at least one extra staff member to do it. So it really is a budgetary change. So maybe we should be recommending that, yes, we aim to do it rather than talk about it.
If I may, if we adopt the policy, then I think the requirements are understood that we will need the staff or the resources to implement. I take that as a given.
Well, we've got the first four recommendations. We've got number 5, Phil, is
that the fees associated with this policy be considered by the Fees and Charges Committee.
Move, Councillor Sheen. Second, Councillor Graham. All in favour? Carried. Yeah, you can take a big.
Page 157, item 8.2.2 is the development applications approved for November 2018 to be noted.
Move, Councillor Nicholson. Second, Councillor Kelly. All in favour?
Item.
Yeah, did you want to move this? You're going. 8.2.
Sorry, item 8.2.3 is the lease of a road reserve between lot 5 DP 10928338 and lots 60, 61, 62 of DP 753604 in Cootamundra.
Could I, through the chair, request that this be moved to the confidential section at the end of the meeting under section 10, paragraph A, section 2C. It's information, if disclosed, could confer a commercial advantage onto another person whom council is conducting a business. So I request that this be held over to confidential.
Let's move, Councillor Palmer. Second, Councillor Graham. All in favour? Carried. Correct report, mate.
Item 8.3.1 is the operations report for December 2018.
Any questions?
Move it as noted.
Move, Councillor Sheen. Second, Councillor Bowden. All in favour?
Item 8.3.2 is the Morley's Creek pedestrian bridge. You might note that we've had various questions in public forums over the last however long, but last meeting in particular we took a question and sought some advice on where the project was up to, and certainly quotes have been obtained or quotes that they could obtain are here, but we actually don't have an allocation within council's budget for it. You might note that it was knocked back for flood damage approval back when that was determined about 18 months ago.
I'll just say something. With this bridge, it is a very important part of the walk cycle track around town. And if you're walking from north at the southern end of Sheridan Street and you want to go over south, you have to cross Morley's Creek. At the present time, if you don't, with the bridge not being there, they do walk through the creek sometimes if it's dry. If not, they've got to go across the dip, which is, there is no sides on it, and very dangerous of a night. And I do know one chap that fell over a couple of months back. He might have been swaying a bit, but that doesn't make any difference when it comes down to insurance policies.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add to that that is the main thoroughfare to the access to those sporting grounds, inclusive of the park area and the skate park. So I consider it is more than an access. I think it's a safety issue, and the importance of that bridge is high. Thank you.
Also to the RV friendly. So.
Just through the chair, this has been going on for nearly 2 years. It's just a shame the budget has blown out to such a degree, but it's got to be resolved. It's just got to be done. I'll second.
Thank you. Move Councillor Graham, second Councillor Palmer. All in favour? Aye. I'll sleep well tonight.
Item 8.4.1 is an update report for the Gundagai Sewer Treatment Plant Replacement Project.
I assume everyone's had a read of that. Any questions to Phil? Everyone right? Move Councillor Kelly. Second Councillor Phillips. All in favour? Carried.
Item 8.4.2 is the Gundagai Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan. You'd note that we've been out on public exhibition with the draft document and no submissions were received. So a final report was prepared and it's the subject of volume 2 of your business paper.
I'd just like to, while we're talking about that, thank actually Phil was a big part of this and members of the emergency service and the staff that worked on it. It took a couple of years, but it's we've got the end result and it's a very, very good report. When it first started, Phil admit, there was some place that the people doing it had it flooded that was probably halfway up a hill, but it was just understanding things. And I was on that committee and I can really vouch for the work done by Phil and the members of the police force and the SES, Ross Houghton, and the staff. I'd like to thank them for what we've got here today, which is a flood study for Gundagai. So thanks, Phil, and they pass it on to the staff.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to be picky, but I mean, on page 7 of the executive summary, previously when the report was done, the second section under existing flood environment, it says, is the site of Australia's worst natural disaster, which occurred in 1852. Now, that was correct until those Victorian fires went through.
Yeah.
I tend to think, if this is a new document, I just tend to think we possibly need to update that. It's on page 7, Phil. I might be wrong, but
it is. No, it was the Black Friday or down it.
That's an easy edit to the document. Yeah.
Even if you put something like up until the Black Friday fires, yeah, it was. So it stays in there.
Any other questions? Someone like to move that report? They're adopted. Move Councillor Bowden, second to Councillor Graham. All in favour? Carry.
Item 8.4.3 of the minutes of the Local Area Traffic Committee held 15th November 2018. The recommendations from within that report are the recommendations that you see immediately below the report here.
Someone like to move those recommendations? All pretty straightforward. Move Councillor Sheen, second to Councillor Phillips. Just while we're on there, Councillor Sheen, the 80-kilometre Muddama, has that come up yet or coming up? They were looking into that, weren't they?
Yes, no, yeah. You meant out at-
Moving past the bridge.
Sorry, out at the Reef Creek Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been looked at. Phil might have the final.
Yep. So we engaged a consultant to do a full road safety audit of Muttama Road. That's been completed now. We've got a final draft report in front of us. So we'll use that documentation as justification to make all those changes.
Mr. Mayor, there's a recommendation here that the Ulysses Club Toy Run event in Cootamundra on Saturday, 8th of December be approved. So are we approving that retrospectively or? Right, so it was? Oh, good, okay.
Mr. Mayor, just wondering, we had a discussion a couple of months ago about the traffic calming measures for book parades and all that kind of stuff. We've got the Christmas fair coming up. Did we do any more investigations about those barriers?
Yeah, we did. So we had a couple of trial samples sent down to our depots. Our staff all looked at them. We got costing of it all, and we put in for grant applications. We've put in for 2 grant applications so far, and we've been unsuccessful thus far.
My question further that then is June tomorrow all these people using these bollards, or they're not going ahead with it?
I have to take that question on notice. I'm not sure what they're doing. I can find out.
I think last year, I know there were some towns for Anzac Day. Some did, some didn't. I've tried to look up, on the internet or wherever to tell you where you should and where you shouldn't, but it's a bit hard to find out, and it's.
I thought something, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I thought we were looking for some policy where it shows that we do actually have to use it and stated as policy, but hasn't come back to us.
Yeah, so there's guidelines produced by the state government that give you guidance on what to do when managing events with a lot of people there and the potential for vehicle abuse. So those guidelines have been passed on to us by our local police sergeant, and we've distributed them. I think I've distributed them to councillors. So they're the guiding document that's determining his decision making in assessing our special event applications at the moment.
So is that just a guideline that they'd like followed, or a clear policy direction that has to be followed? Or is it all open to interpretation?
Well, the recommendations that have come back from the local police area command associated with our event applications have specified that we shall have. So that's why we've had to go the extra mile and put barriers in. And he's following the guidelines, but I'm not sure whether that's policy for him to follow or whether he's just...
Could we seek some clarification? Is it a guideline or a policy, please?
Yep. So how about we organise a meeting with our local police command and discuss the issue?
If I could, through the chair, because we're now in the Wagga Police District and before we're in the Cootamundra LAC, it will probably be guided by what the Wagga LAC tells us as opposed to what we had before. So they may have a different interpretation. And my other comment was, I know we've got the Cootamundra Beach Volleyball coming up in February, which I know whenever we've ran it in the last couple of years, we've had to put traffic calming so no one could drive through and hurt anyone. So we've had barriers there. So it's an issue that's coming up, and it'd be nice to find out if we have to do it, because it would save us a lot of money in putting on a community event.
Actually, last week at Rock, Bob Noble, the commander for the whole Wagga area in our area, he spoke at Rock, and he's a really good bloke, Bob, and he has been around 2 or 3 councils, but he's happy to come to any council meeting to speak to the council. So I think it'd be good if we can ask him, could he come to our January meeting? He's very receptive, and he's a good bloke, and he'd be quite happy to come and speak, I'm sure. And I think that's, we need to hear it firsthand, and I'm sure we'll get it from Bob.
Mr. Mayor, it might be timely now that Gundagai last Thursday evening held a late night shopping evening and a Christmas carnival with council's cooperation, and now is a great opportunity for, on behalf of the Tourism Action Committee, that we give our appreciation to council, because with the use of their heavy vehicle equipment and staffing, it enabled us to block off that street to put children's rides in one block of our main street. So on behalf of TAC, thank you.
Well done.
And the staff involved volunteered their time, so that was pretty good form.
That's excellent, actually. Excellent.
Well, word of thanks should go to all the staff.
Right, now next is the confidential items. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait there. Sorry, yes, we have got, thanks, Marianne. Late report.
So there's two items in your late report that needed to be circulated. You've got item 8.1.11 is the investment report for November, which didn't make the original business paper.
Investment report. Any questions, or would someone like to move the recommendation that be received and noted? Move Councillor Nicholson, second Councillor Kelly. All in favour? Carried.
And the second report is 8.4.4 for the purchase of a scrubber cleaner for cleaning Sheridan Street Gundagai footpaths. You might recall a number of emails going back and forth between the general manager and councillors in the past about a solution for cleaning the streets at Gundagai. Tim Morris and Steve Woodland, our staff members, took it on board to actually trial a range of scrubbers and cleaners available on the market, with a view of coming back with a proposal to council to include this item on the plant replacement program. So after a range of trials, the best machine for the job has been recommended here. You might recall that Cootamundra has a sweeper, not a scrubber, a sweeper within its plant fleet, which makes the journey over to Gundagai every week, a couple of times a week, but it just doesn't do the job of actually cleaning the high quality stone that we've put down. It's a different purpose machine, but it's costing us a lot of money to actually transport that machine between Cootamundra and Gundagai, and the cost of that transport and mucking around would easily be saved with a capital purchase into Gundagai of its own purpose fit machine. So that discussion was had between councillors via email. I saw a lot of that email trail, and following that identification of the need, we've done a lot of research into it, and actually come up with a machine which is a lot cheaper than what I think councillors were originally intending on allocating, which was in the order of 100,000. So
sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, I move the recommendation as is, and congratulate Tim Morris and Steve Woodland for the excellent way they went about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's horses for courses. If you've got like stone paving, level surface, and that sort of thing that you want to get clean, it's a perfect fit machine. Because you've got asphalt and different types of material mix, your sweep is probably adequate for that purpose, Mark. Would that be fair? Oh, the pressure washer itself. Yeah.
We've got a recommendation. Move Councillor Graham, second Councillor Nicholson. All in favour?
Aye.
Right, we now move into closed committee. Could I have someone move those recommendations to go into closed committee that are there on page